First, she thanked the HR representative for sending her a copy of company termination policy beforehand, so she could familiarize herself with our procedures. Before she let anyone else speak, she asked a few questions. "Mr. Waxman, Ms. Patterson, I understand you are man and wife. True." Beverly said yes as positively as she could, and Dave just nodded. "Tell me, Ms. Patterson, if you will, how has this impacted your marriage? Do you consider what your husband is doing reasonable? I'd like to clear this up before it gets to the civil stage." Dave didn't speak up, so Beverly went first. "We are most definitely married and will remain so. Yes, it has absolutely impacted our marriage. He's moved out, hasn't talked to me since he did, and now we're here. I must have told him 100 times what I did was just business, and it shouldn't impact our private lives. I really don't understand why he's doing this." The arbitrator thought the woman delusional. How could it not impact their marriage? She had told him he had no value to the company, terminated him after 9 years, sent him home, and couldn't understand why he was angry? She turned to the husband. "Mr. Waxman, care to comment?" "Ma'am, on the advice of my lawyer, I am not here to discuss my domestic situation. This meeting is solely to determine if my wrongful termination complaint has merit." "Fair enough. Ms. Patterson, please tell me exactly what occurred the day you terminated Mr. Waxman and state your reasons for letting him go." Bev explained how his supervisor, Bob Adler, had come to her to discuss the terrible sales record of Mr. Waxman, going back almost a year. She stated she had no idea his numbers had gotten so bad, and that after discussing it in depth with his manager, they agreed he should be let go. She also said it was the hardest business decision she had ever made, but she had to put the interests of the company first. The arbitrator asked for documentation and frowned when none could be produced. "Tell me, Ms. Patterson, if this employee had a very good record for 8 years and then his sales plummeted, would you not have been curious and try to determine why? If he had been a good employee for so long, surely he deserved a chance to turn his sales around. A probationary period explained in detail, in writing, what failure to produce would result in, and monthly monitoring to ensure he was going in the right direction. The reason I ask is that very scenario is described in the company manual your HR department sent me for employees with at least 5 years of tenure." Beverly squirmed and gave her coached answer. "That is correct, but as CEO, I have the authority to terminate anyone at will. The numbers had dropped so radically, I thought we were in danger of losing some very old and lucrative accounts. In fact, that is exactly what is happening. I felt I had no choice." The arbitrator nodded, then turned to Dave. "Sir, does this sound reasonable?" Dave actually grinned. "Not at all. There was a reason the numbers were low. I even tried to explain it to Ms. Patterson a few times at work and in our domestic situation, but she told me I needed to stay out of things above my pay grade, so I dropped it. Tell me then, why did your numbers drop so dramatically?" Believe it or not, it was planned. We were coming out with a new and improved product, and there was a lot of old inventory still available. I talked the customers into buying the new product by discounting the old and clearing it out of inventory. I have here statements from 4 of our customers substantiating this. As soon as the old reached a predetermined threshold, they were going to order the new in bulk. It was a win-win for everyone. They got the old inventory at a discount, which would be more than made up for when they ordered the new. So yes, I goofed off a little, played golf, and had dinners with clients while we discussed projected volume. I never, not once, forgot I had the best interests of my company to watch out for. My immediate supervisor knew all this. Why isn't he here? I asked specifically for him. This isn't a court, Mr. Waxman. I can't force someone to appear at an informal hearing. Do you have any proof of your claims? Amanda Austin reached into her briefcase and extracted some paperwork, passing it to the arbitrator. She read through a few, frowning. The corporate lawyer tried to stop her, but she once again told him this wasn't a courtroom. He settled by demanding to see them after she was through. She would hand him a sheet when she got through with it, and his own frown got deeper. They argued back and forth until the arbitrator put a stop to it. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. I've heard and seen enough. Ms. Patterson, you were in direct violation of company guidelines when you terminated him. To put it in legalese, you denied him due process. My finding is that Mr. Waxman was let go without cause or recourse to his rights under company guidelines. Therefore, I'm ordering you to give him his position back with no recriminations and pay his salary from the time he was separated from the company until now. Either of you may appeal this decision if you wish, but you will have to travel to the Capitol, and it will be considered a legal proceeding. Does anyone object at this time? My head down in despair, Beverly shook her head no. Dave spoke. I'll accept the back pay, ma'am, and thank you. I will not return to the company because I feel it would be a toxic environment. Besides, I have a new job that I'm really enjoying. Well, she was truly screwed, Bev realized. Her career was over, and she would be lucky if they let her stay with the company. Her lawyer and Dave's had a few words afterwards, and he was definitely still not smiling when he returned. Back at the office, they went into a conference room and he spelled it out. The hearing went pretty much as I expected. You need to make sure he gets that check as soon as possible. Amanda told me they were suing us, naming you, Adler, and the company in the suit. I told her to set a time, and we would get together and settle. Apparently, your husband doesn't want to settle. He wants to air it out in court and make it a matter of public record. That means that anyone with any brains can look it up. How many talented people do you think would look at that and not send us resumes? I frankly don't know how to proceed. Normally, we would throw a little money at him, and it would just go away. That won't work here, because it's not about the money. You need to talk to your husband as soon as possible and get him to let us work something out. I would do that very thing, sir, if I knew how to get in touch with him. He's left me, changed his number, and just disappeared. None of our mutual friends have heard from him or even seen him. When he said he had a new job, it was news to me. This is a small market, and I would have heard if he was selling for someone else. I'll try a few of his friends, telling them it's extremely urgent, but I have no idea if they'll help. He left, saying as soon as he got the paperwork he would return. Jen took Beverly out to lunch to cheer her up. It didn't really work. Jen, clever girl that she was, distracted Bev by talking about the upcoming visit to Solomon Industries. The old man has always liked you, Bev. Turn on the charm and get him back into the fold. Free words of advice here. While he likes you, he doesn't care much for Adler. I couldn't tell you why, but it's pretty well known that if you're... She paused, stopping herself from saying ex-husband. If Dave wasn't running interference, Adler would have angered him enough to have already left. Beverly's head was swimming. She asked herself why, as CEO, she didn't have that information. A small voice was starting to say she should have paid more attention to Dave when he talked about his job. She had finally admitted to herself, after half a bottle of scotch, she had been minimizing his position for quite a while, and she was struggling to understand why. Dave had won, but he had to think hard to try and figure out what he had won. He had, without a doubt, destroyed the woman I was supposed to love and support. She would be extremely lucky if she got to keep her job, or even stay with her company. Did he feel good about it? Not really. He knew how much she loved that job, how she loved giving out her business card with CEO on it. He did, however, feel vindicated. She had brought this on herself. Oh, it was a lot worse than what she would have done to just an employee, but it would have been just a matter of time before her arrogance and egotism drove her to do something just as stupid to someone else. Maybe she would mark it up to hard experience and use it as a learning experience. Now that that part of their lives was over, Dave wondered if they had any kind of chance to get over it and remain a couple. He knew he would never return to the old relationship. It would be a full partnership or nothing. He was damn sure never going to live in that monstrosity she called a home. It was nothing more than an edifice to her success. Sad, really. It would have made a great home in which to raise children. Well, one thing he had to look forward to was the money. The back pay, almost 5 months' worth, was a nice chunk of change. Amanda was at his throat to settle instead of dragging it out in court, reminding him that the best revenge was living well. They had sued the company for $2 million, and she said they would probably offer 20% just to keep it out of the papers. She found out they were in the process of merging with a competitor, and this little incident would severely impact their worth going forward. Firing Beverly wouldn't really help at this stage, but it might save them some face. Dave liked the new town. It was half the size of the city he left, and the pace was more relaxed. The people were friendlier, and he couldn't ask for a better place to work. Best of all, the housing market was a little depressed, and it was possible to buy a lot more home with a lot less money than he would have spent back home. He grinned and shrugged at the thought. What did back home constitute exactly? He wasn't at all sure anymore. Dave even had his eye on a place that had been for sale for almost a year, a larger, older 2-story on 6 acres of land. He didn't need that much, but it would be fun to own. The owners were getting anxious to sell, and he had feeling he could get a really good deal. He researched it on the net, and it seemed solid, with no major problems other than the roof. It was still good, but was 20 years old. He'd already decided if he bought it, he would replace the shingles with tin. It was all the rage, and he had fond memories of staying with his grandparents on their farm in the summer, going to sleep with the sound of rain on the roof. That night, Dave dreamed, something he rarely did. Likely, he dreamed all the time, but he hardly ever remembered them. This dream had him sitting on the front porch of the house beside a woman, both of them in a glider, rocking gently while they watched 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, run around the yard playing with a ball, 2 dogs, one big and one small, chasing them. A large calico cat sat on the railing, looking on, seemingly bored. In a wave of love, he turned to kiss his companion, only to discover she had no face. He woke with a start and lay there, trying to figure out what it meant. Sighing, he got up, deciding to hit the gym on the way to work. It was going to be a busy day. Beverly didn't sleep well that night, and as she got ready for work, she noticed the bags under her eyes. She hoped it was just stress-related, but if they were permanent, well, she knew a good doctor. If anyone wanted to maintain in her world, they had to look like 25, yet have 15 years of experience. In a way, she was looking forward to what was coming. The lawyer did a little research on Bob and came to her with disquieting news. It seemed he was in negotiations with the company they were merging with to take over her job when the contracts were signed. Corporate's directives were very clear. Remove the cancer immediately. This time, however, Bev had all her ducks in a row. Jack, their lawyer, and Angela, a woman flown down from corporate HR, would be with her to make sure there were no mistakes. It rankled Bev a little to have them there. She was perfectly capable of handling it on her own, but recent experience taught her that this could be a good thing. Bob was surprised to find he wasn't going with her to see Sal, and by then, she had no reason to sugarcoat the reason. Sal despises you, Bob. I'm trying to get back in his good graces, and bringing you along would undermine that. He seemed surprised, then got angry. Screw that old fart, babe. His business doesn't mean that much to us. Do I need to remind you to remain professional here? I was never your babe, so you need to cut that out. If you think losing 18% of our sales base means so little, perhaps you're not as suited to your job as I first thought. You were pretty pissed when you heard the news. Think about that while I'm gone, and remember, we need to meet after I get back, so keep your schedule flexible. I'll call you when I return. She enjoyed the look on his face as she left, and couldn't wait to see it when they lowered the boom that afternoon. Pushing him out of her mind as she drove, she worked on her presentation to Sal and his new purchasing manager. It had to be just right if she were to have any chance. Sal was waiting at the restaurant, even though Bev was 15 minutes early. He stood and seated her, and she appreciated it. Dave had always been well-mannered, taught by a great uncle who instilled in him that manners never went out of style. She missed that, among other things. They chatted for a minute, but when she started talking business, he stopped her. Please, Beverly, let's wait for my purchasing director. I want his opinions and insight on anything we go over. He should be here any minute. In fact, here he is now. Bev turned to greet him, and the words died in her throat. Dave, he was the new purchasing director? If she wasn't dead in the water before, she was now. He must have seen the despair in her eyes and spoke to her gently. Hello, Beverly. Wow, you went all out. I bet I haven't seen you in that dress 3 times, and everyone was an important event in your life. I can see why you wore it, though. You always looked spectacular in it. Beverly didn't know how to answer, so she changed the subject. This is the job you talked about in arbitration? You're in purchasing now? For a salesman, that must be like going to the dark side. He grinned. It is, kind of, but it's really just sales in reverse, if you can understand what I mean. Besides, it's worth it when I see salesmen, and they realize who I am. It blows their plans completely. I've been there, done that, and there isn't much they can surprise me with. It actually makes things easier. They know they can't bullshit me, so they just get down to negotiations. That being said, let's enjoy lunch and talk business later. It was surreal to Beverly, sitting there eating lunch with her husband, knowing he held all the power. She couldn't help but wonder if that was how he felt at times. Dessert over, with cups of very good coffee in hand, she began her speech. She pointed out how long they had done business together, how well they had responded to Sal's needs, and how they could continue to service him with excellence in the future. Dave let Sal take the lead, for which she was grateful. Sal listened, but stopped her halfway through. All you say is true, Beverly, but let's not forget who landed our business in the first place and served us so well over the years. I was buying that as well as material, and now, well, the situation has changed. Before you ask, yes, I did have a verbal commitment with your salesman. Once he left the company, though, I no longer considered it binding. The South Koreans, to be honest, have a better product at a great price. It exceeds the specifications we have for your product. My purchasing agent happens to know the son of the owner and finds him trustworthy. Who are you going to replace Dave with? Adler? I don't think so. I've never liked him, but more importantly, I never trusted him. Even if we had stayed with you, I'd insist on another account rep. He stood, looking down on her. I always liked you, Beverly, even if I didn't exactly like the things you did sometimes. I'm still your friend, if you let me, but professionally, we're pretty much through. I have another appointment, so I'm leaving. You can continue to press your case with my purchasing agent, if you wish. Best of luck. He said the last with a grin, bent down and kissed her cheek. He still loves you, he whispered, but it's going to be a long road to get him to trust you again. Give it your best shot. Did Dave enjoy the lunch? Yes, on several levels. Did he enjoy her pain? Just a small amount. It was very satisfying to see her looking lost and confused, and not the supremely confident Mega which she projected most of the time in her natural environment. She looked at him sadly. We don't have a chance, do we? Are you talking professionally or privately? If you're talking business, then no, you don't. Their product is superior to yours in almost every way, much cheaper and readily available. Even if I were still with the company, it would have only been a matter of time before we would have started losing customers. You need to get with corporate and rethink your business plan. Maybe you should go in the direction I suggested a year ago, retool your assembly lines, get R&D more involved. It's time to reinvent yourselves, or you'll be as extinct as the dinosaurs in a few years. Dave looked into her confused eyes and realized she didn't recall what he tried to tell her all those months ago. He was no business genius, but he was literate enough to read the writing on the wall. Then again, he didn't have power goggles on. Arrogance and egotism is its own reward. They sat silently for a few minutes. Dave, she said in a timid voice, may I ask about us? Dave almost laughed but stopped himself. Instead, he asked her as gently as possible, what us? You and me, honey. Please, you need to move back home so we can go back to what we had. I miss you very much. Dave got the impression that she was surprised by his reply. What us? There hasn't been an us for going on 3 years now. There was me, the ornament at dinners and parties, someone to come home to, but that's about it. I was just a minor supporting character in the movie of your life. Intimacy died between us years ago, Beverly, and I don't see a resurgence in our future. Before you say it, yes, we were intimate on rare occasions, but stop to think. How many times did I initiate it in the last 2 years? I'll give you a hint. Never. I felt like I was just a human dildo, there to give you release when you needed it. There was no foreplay to speak of before, and no snuggling after. As soon as you got off, you were ready to roll over and go to sleep, whether I'd gotten anything out of it or not. Don't deny it. Instead, think about it, and you'll see I'm right. He could see conflicting emotions playing across her face, but he was on a roll, getting things he'd wanted to say for years off his chest. As for coming home, well, I'll never darken the door of that house again, whether we stay together or not. It was never a home, it was a monument to your success, and you fought me tooth and nail when I wanted to make changes. In fact, I have a bid in now on a home I think I'll really like. It's an older 2-story, too much house for me, actually, but it has lots of room and a little acreage. Best of all, it already has a building that would be perfect for the workshop I've thought about for years, and room for the vegetable garden I always wanted to plant. I'm sorry, honey, but after 8 years of living in your shadows, I've learned to love the light. Where does that leave us? It was so sad and forlorn that he toned it down. I couldn't tell you. I suspect we'll never be together as man and wife again. You have to respect your partner, and I haven't had that from you as a man or employee for quite a while now. I'm not a supporting character anymore. Beverly, I want my own show. I realize now that it's at least partly my fault we ended up like this. But at the time, I loved you so much that if it made you happy, I learned to live with it. And the more I gave, the more you wanted until it got to the point I had nothing left to give. I suspect, deep down, that that is the exact moment when you realized you didn't need me anymore. You had minimized my impact on your life to the point that I was invisible to you. Really, it shouldn't be that hard on you. Just carry on as you've been doing, and pretty soon I'll just be a dim memory. He stood, placing my hand on her shoulder. Go back to the love of your life, Bev, your job. And free advice, stay away from Adler. The man's a snake. I don't know how he got into your head long enough to scramble your brains, but step back and consider, what did he have to gain by poisoning your mind against me? Think about it. And don't worry too much. You've been too good for too long for this brain fart to wound you fatally. You might lose a notch or two and have to do some major butt kissing, but the company still knows your worth. Goodbye, Bev." He paused for just a second. "I'm sorry my company and yours have come to a parting of the ways, Beverly, but really, it's just business, you know?" She flinched, and he wondered if she caught his meaning. It was the exact phrase she had used to justify firing him. Beverly wanted to sit for a while and digest everything, so she went to a park she'd seen on the way into town, parked, found a bench, and reviewed her life. Some of it filled her with immense satisfaction. She could remember every promotion, the hard work she had done to get it, and the immediate plans to move to the next level, until finally she was at the top of her little food chain. Some of it filled her with unease. The anniversaries she'd missed, always promising to make it up to Dave, the birthdays, the special events in his life, her parents, his parents, and their friends' lives, all missed while she chased the next deal. She remembered seeing the fleeting look of pain in Dave's eyes when the toddler of one of their friends' children tottered up to him with upraised arms. He cuddled the child, and for a moment Bev had a vision it was their child. She shook it off. Unless Dave would consent to being a full-time house husband, there would never be any children in their future. She'd seen many a woman, full of talent and promise, get sidelined and passed by because they couldn't commit fully to the job because of family. Besides, she was 36, so that ship had probably already sailed. She sat straight up in shock at her realization. God, Dave was right. He would always be second in her priorities, as long as she continued on the path she had committed to. It must really have been like her having another lover, one he couldn't compete with or fight. It hit her then. To get him back was going to be a long and difficult road. She did want him back. Yes, she had minimized him to the point of no respect, but he was her rock, the one she always turned to when she needed comfort and assurance, positive that at least, in his world, she was number one. The question was how? How could she undo the damage she'd done to his heart and his ego? Could she learn to balance career and marriage enough to keep him satisfied and assured he was the most important thing to her? She knew it would be horrifically difficult, but she was a driven, goal-oriented person, and if she set her mind to it, Bev knew she could do anything. Satisfied, she watched the children play for a bit, a sad smile on her lips. After a few minutes, it turned into a real smile. The first stop on her journey back would be to fire one of the snakes in her garden. She tried to muster up some sympathy for Bob, but could find none. He betrayed her husband, her, and the company. She wasn't as dense as he'd imagined, but she had to admit she was vain enough to listen to him feed her ego. Now it was time for his sins to come home to roost. She called ahead and set the time. Their lawyer and the HR representative were ready. They had arrived while she was gone, and she knew that after dealing with Bob, there would be some tough choices to be made and some bad news she would have to deal with. So be it. She had weathered storms before, and that day, it just wasn't as important to her as it had been in days past. Bob came in all smiles that immediately went away when he saw who was in the room. She didn't have to introduce Jack, but he had never seen Angela. Bev went right for his throat. "Bob, this is Angela from corporate HR. She'll be auditing this meeting. We've received some disturbing news about some of your recent activities, and in the interest of fairness, we've decided to hear what you say about it." Jack stepped in. "I don't know how you found out about the merger talks, but when you did, you apparently ran right to their company and engaged in a smear campaign against our CEO and our company, trying to woo them into giving you her job. Don't act surprised. Their representatives came to us in concern, so we know the whole story. I'm sorry to say the negotiations are on hold while we try to clean up our in-house mess. They made it clear that you have to go, without reference, for the talks to continue. Apparently, they've reached the conclusion that if you would do this to us, what's to keep you from doing it to them in the future?" Bob went through several shades of red while he found his voice. "So you found out. Let me guess. I'm to be terminated for cause. At least this time, you got your ducks in a row. I know you will walk me through the appeal process, but I'd be wasting my time, so I'll go. Your company was right to try to dump this dinosaur. If there isn't a major restructure completed in the next 3 years, there will be nothing to spin off." He grinned at Beverly, which set her teeth on edge. "You got too complacent, girl. I played you like a banjo, feeding that massive ego, undermining that loser of a husband, even if he was the best thing sales had going for them. I'm glad I never got around to screwing you. I bet you'd be next to worthless in the sack. You're too wrapped up in yourself to give pleasure to anyone else. Of course, I would have lied, told you how hot you were, until it was time to get rid of you. Whatever, it doesn't matter now. I'll leave today, and send word to payroll where to send the last check. May you live in interesting times, Bev. Beverly flamed red. Dave used to say that a lot, and she never knew what it meant until Bob heard him once and explained it to her. It's a Chinese proverb, or maybe a curse. Interesting times meant unrest, revolution, famine, that sort of thing, while boring times meant everything was good. Bev kept a neutral look on her face when she answered him. Same to you, Mr. Adler, and I'd like to add another wise saying. Cheaters never prosper. Stop looking for the path of least resistance and try to earn something for once in your life. Goodbye. Jack and Beverly stood and started walking out. Bob, glowing with anger, started to speak, but Angela cut him off. The time for talk is over, Mr. Adler. You have some documents I need you to sign, and then you can get on with your life. Please do not make this difficult. The two large security guards that appeared just then made him think that might be a good idea. Dave bought the house, getting a really good deal. He immediately gave the roofing contractor he'd consulted the go-ahead, and 2 weeks later, the gray tin complemented the color of paint he had chosen for the exterior. While he was at it, he had the carpet pulled out and the original hardwood floors refinished. It had a wraparound porch, and Dave installed ceiling fans over the rockers and the porch swing to help keep it cool in the summer while he enjoyed the sunsets. He could have afforded the house, using his back pay and part of his savings as a down payment, but he would have still carried a 15-year mortgage, so he succumbed to my lawyer's pleas and took a settlement instead of going to court. It wasn't as much as they had hoped, because, frankly, that division wasn't all that profitable anymore. He still got enough to buy the house outright, make the changes he wanted, and have some left over, along with his severance pay and all his savings. That had been another bone of contention. Bev would never agree to a joint account, so they each had their own and deposited a set amount into a household fund. He knew that if they divorced, he would be entitled to half the value of the house because they never had a prenup, and since their earnings were so disparate, he could probably get maintenance for a few years. He grinned, thinking about how much that would have galled her. In the end, he decided to let her do the filing. After all, she determined everything else about their lives, so why should this be any different? He found that he was a natural in his new job, his years in sales benefiting him greatly. Surprisingly, 75% of the salesmen he dealt with loved him. He didn't play games, expect gifts or kickbacks, stopped doing business with anyone who tried to bribe or hustle him into accepting an inferior product. In general, he expected an honest price and excellent service. Those who dealt honestly and gave him what he wanted got his business. The other 25% learned quickly that Dave didn't require expensive dinners, outings to strip clubs, or rounds of golf at exclusive resorts. Some understood and appreciated his approach, others were so stuck in their ways they never learned, and they lost his business. Sal loved Dave. Their materials and service costs were 20% lower, deadlines were rarely missed, and Dave took advantage of offers to have vendor technicians come in and observe and make suggestions, about half of which they took. The line workers loved Dave because their job got easier and their production bonuses got larger. Susan insisted he come to dinner at least twice a month, and the conversation inevitably turned to his domestic situation. Sal wisely stayed out of it, but Susan would not be deterred. When are you going to stop punishing the poor girl and take her back? She suffered enough. She calls me, maybe once a week, and we always have the same discussion. She wants to know how you're doing. Are you happy? And though you can hear the pain when she asks if you're dating, I tell her the truth, straight from your mouth. You refuse to see any woman socially until the day the ring comes off your finger. Dave tolerated it a few times before he got a little irritated. Susan, I admire you a great deal. If there was a category called ideal wife in the dictionary, it would show your face. But let me ask you something. You had a pretty good career when you married Sal, and he told me you worked for 6 more years before you quit and became a full-time mother. Sal had to face many of the same pressures Beverly faces now, but did he ever shut you out, miss anniversaries, dates that were important to you or your children? Did Sal ever once put his business before you and your family? Did he minimize your contributions to the relationship? Dave paused and waited. She finally admitted there had been maybe 3 times in their marriage when the job had to come first, but that he had felt so badly about them that he showered her and the children with affection for weeks afterwards. Well, I didn't have that experience. Her attitude was, suck it up, big boy. This is more important. I lost friends, relationships I'd had for years, victims to her career. I'm just now getting used to having friends again, to being able to accept invitations for little get-togethers, things that are simple and mundane to them, but precious to me. They're not networking per se, just hanging out and enjoying the company. I've got a house I love, a place to enjoy my hobbies. I even got to plant a little garden, something I've wanted to do for years. Does that mean I don't miss her? No. I remember the little things before she became important. The spur-of-the-moment trips to sightsee, which was code for making love in a strange bed, the conversations about life we used to have years ago when we actually shared a vision. I remember all that, but those memories are dim. And the ones fresh in my mind are of her egotism and arrogance. She was like a sports star that read her own press, believing every story. She wants me back? Why? Most importantly, Susan, if she wants me, why hasn't she come to me? She's still in queen mode, waiting for the errant knight to return. If she's not willing to put any effort into our almost dead marriage, what makes you think she wants it that bad? I haven't even received a phone call. Doesn't sound like she's all that heartbroken to me. In this case, Muhammad needs to come to the mountain. Now, I love you both dearly, and your husband is my boss, but this is the last conversation we're having about Beverly. If you'll excuse me. He hadn't ranted or raved, but said everything in a calm, reasoned manner. But the message was there. Leave it alone. Sal looked thoughtful, and Susan was red with embarrassment. She rose as he was leaving and surprised him with a hug. I'm sorry, Dave. I won't push you anymore, but you're wrong. She misses you terribly, and the truth is she's afraid to talk to you. She doesn't really know what to say, and she's afraid you'll bite her head off. I'm going to call her in a bit and tell her about what you said. And you have my solemn word. This will be the last time I involve myself. She grinned and kissed his cheek. Besides, you're doing too well in your job for me to rock the boat. I estimate your contributions have shaved at least 3 years off our retirement plans. Carry on. It never occurred to Dave that Sal was thinking about retiring. He was just over 50, but his daughter was due to start work in the near future, and popular rumor has it as soon as he feels comfortable with her at the helm, he was going to sail away into the sunset. Dave had a fleeting thought of working with another Beverly and wondered if he could handle it. Once again, Beverly went home to an empty house to eat takeout and pretend to watch television. She had escaped the axe, but it was a close thing. The chairman and 2 board members flew down unannounced, scaring the whole office. She was almost faint when they called her into the conference room. She felt like a schoolgirl in front of the principal. Their expressionless stares didn't bolster her self-confidence. After almost a minute, the senior board member spoke. All right, Beverly, tell us what happened, and more importantly, tell us why. Don't whitewash it or you'll be out of here so fast your head will spin. We've always trusted you to be honest. It would be a shame if we were to start doubting you now. It took a few pauses and a couple of crying breaks, but she got it out. She had nothing to lose, so she told them the truth. She had let my ego get the best of her, relied on people who didn't have the company's best interest at heart, and got played like a foolish schoolgirl. They seemed relieved when it was over, and sympathetic. How are things on the home front? Have you kissed and made up yet? This started another round of sniffles. The chairman got a box of tissues and set them in front of Beverly. She mumbled her thanks as she blew her nose. No, and I doubt we're going to. I haven't talked to my husband in weeks. He's living in a new town with a new job, in a house he bought, and has no intentions of leaving. I've always liked Dave, reflected the chairman. It seems out of character for him to ignore your gestures of reconciliation. Bev flamed red and told them she hadn't contacted him because she was ashamed and didn't know what to say. The chairman sighed. Well, there you go then. We may as well accept your resignation now. 2 of the traits I admired most in you were your ability to analyze a problem and your tenacity in achieving your goals. Obviously, you don't want your husband back. And to be honest, someone who shows so much hesitation and indecision is not top management material. I mind the times not that long ago where the hounds of hell couldn't keep you from accomplishing your goals. His words stung. Only the fact that he was right kept her from lashing out. He saw her face redden and the sudden thrust of her jaw and chuckled. Ah, there you are. I was beginning to think I'd lost you for good. Now, listen closely. You're still on shaky ground here. Bill, Jack, and I are your only supporters right now, and we've gone out on a limb for you. Do not chop it off behind us. You still have your job, but don't look for a favorable review or a bonus this year. What you do have is a second chance, but hear us out before you sigh in relief. This division was headed for a crash, Beverly. We're aware of the South Koreans and their imminent threat. If we stay the course we're on now, we would be out of business in 3 years. It's one of the reasons we decided to sell this division off, while it was still at the top. Your little gaffe brought that to a grinding halt. Between the suit and the snake you had trusted stabbing us all in the back, we're not nearly as desirable. The merger talks are history. What you need to do is figure out a way to reinvent the division, come up with products and services, and give it a viable future. I'm going to be as blunt as necessary here. Do it, and you redeem yourself. Fail, and you're out. We're giving you a year. His voice softened. It was the best we could do, Beverly. I know you'll make me proud, even if you fail. We have faith in you. She was so overwhelmed that a simple handshake wouldn't do, so she gave each a heartfelt hug, swearing she would give it everything she had. She hugged the chairman last, after the others had gone. He took her hands after they broke. I'm going to give you advice on something that has nothing to do with work. If you really want Dave back, you'll have to go to him. He'll never come to you because you've hurt his pride too badly. He holds the power now, child. He's got a good job, good friends, and a bright future. You're going to have to show him you want an equal partner, and you have to mean it. The first instance of backsliding, and it will be over. I really believe you forgot, but Dave is a pretty shrewd individual. He saw the writing on the wall for this division last year. We even had a brief talk about it the last time I was down, and he mentioned the South Korean company then. He even had some ideas on how to rechannel our efforts to make us more viable in the market. I was impressed enough to tell him to discuss it with you. I have the feeling that discussion never took place. If it had, perhaps we wouldn't be having this talk now. Call me if you need resources, and if I think it's justified, I'll allocate them. Think about everything I said, business and private, and make good decisions. She left the conference room and went back to her office. Jin was hovering, and Beverly told her it was not all bad news, but that she needed some time to marshal her thoughts. She also asked Jin not to let anyone disturb her for the rest of the day. She locked herself in and thought about the most important goal in her life. How could she get Dave to love her again? The start was simple, with the help of Susan. Beverly cyber-stalked him, getting on his Facebook page and starting a conversation. She knew he took some of his bonuses from Sal and had bought an old car, slowly restoring it in his new garage. He posted every step, describing in detail what he was doing. He put out an appeal for a front bumper cover, and she burned up the websites. Money was no object. If it got her back into his life, it would be worth every dime. The fates were with her, because a man contacted her, showing the front end of the car. It was perfection, but the back was totally trashed, thanks to a secret joyride by two of his great-nephews. When he found out how expensive it would be to restore, he pulled it out in a field and left it for 6 months. The interior was in excellent condition, and the front end gleamed like a new penny. Beverly bought it instantly, but not before bargaining him down almost $1,000. Hey, she was a master of negotiation when she remembered. Beverly planned her attack with precision, using Susan to help her. Dave was having a barbecue to show off his new gas grill and clay oven. It was mostly people from work, along with a few of his neighbors. Susan asked casually if she could bring a friend, and he readily agreed. This better not blow up on us, she warned Beverly. If he gets really pissed, it would make it incredibly awkward between him and Sal. Of course, he has a built-in defense. He has no idea who my friend is, and I told him you were meeting us at his house, promising faithfully that if it started going bad, she would leave immediately. Beverly finished her plans. She must have changed outfits a dozen times before she realized it was just a cookout and she should dress for comfort. She went for a really nice sundress in his favorite color, light blue. It stopped just above her knees, and quite a bit of leg would be showing when she sat down.